Hello, good morning, and welcome to The Rest is Coffee.
Maybe we should
I'm
change it.
back. I haven't been here for a while. Alex isn't with us today, but we've also got Stephen and Martin in case there weren't enough middle-aged folks on having podcasts
With beards.
with beards. Yes, yes. How's everyone doing?
Good,
I'm
thank
good.
you.
That's my emergency dad's joke. Dad jokes. Father's Day present from my son. So yeah. So why don't prawns give to charity?
Because they're so shellfish.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
classic. Yeah. Come for the jokes, stay for the politics.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to talk. We're going to talk about a couple of things, and obviously, if you have any comments, do put them wherever you're watching this, and hopefully they'll appear on here as if by magic. First up, local government reform is kicking off again. And Stephen, in fact, I'm not presumably, you will know rather more about this, I think, than most people because you're on the cabinet for HDC.
Yeah. So it's been kicking off consistently in my world. Yeah. Since this was announced in December, since the government said they're going to reorganise local government and basically put an end to district and county councils, which is something I think that we're probably all broadly in favour of, but they're also trying to do it at pace as well, which they've received quite a lot of criticism for, but also, like, I think, in local government and government, we end up talking about things for too long, and sometimes hitting things with a big hammer and just getting something done can be a more effective way of doing things. Having said that, last local government reorganisation in 1974 was a bit of a mess, and there's also a good argument for doing things properly. So the position is that there was two deadlines to respond. The first was by March, when some councils presented some initial proposals, ones that were being fast-tracked. And kind of the final deadline for this is that all the district and county councils are supposed to come to their own conclusions about how they want to reform into a smaller number of unitaries by November. And, November seems like a long time away, especially as we have the first couple of days of summer this weekend. But it isn't really, because the summer's quite quiet. And so behind the scenes, frantically, the leaders of all these councils, so in Huntingdonshire, or in Cambridgeshire, that means Peterborough, Hunts, Fenland, South Cambs, East Cambs and Cambridge City, have been working behind the scenes to try and work out how they're going to reform themselves into these unitaries. And the guideline from the government, as we understand it, and Alex in some messages this week has kind of challenged one of these a bit, is that there need to be about 500,000 people. Yeah, and if you look at the combined population of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, it's just, I think, is it 980,000? So it's, broadly, we're talking about 2 unitaries. Yeah, there are arguments for splitting into 3 unitaries, but those 3 unitaries are very small. And the feeling is that very small unitaries are less financially viable. So the first rule is that there could be about 500,000 people. The second rule is they don't, as we understand it, and this is the one that Alex is challenging, is they don't want to split unitaries up. Sorry, they don't want to split districts up. And so whatever we get to will be a combination of the current district councils plus Peterborough in Cambridgeshire. Yeah, so 2s and 3s or 4s and 2s, depending on how you split it. And so what the leaders of all those councils have been doing since Christmas, but more frantically recently, is coming up with some proposals. There were originally 6 proposals, which you won't have seen, but I've seen, and 3 of them were rejected on economic basis mainly. I think 1 or 2 of those involve splitting districts, which is thought to be unpopular, and so we're down to 3 kind of final options, which are called here Option A, Option B, Option C. Rather confusingly for me, they've been called 2, 4, and 6. So I'm going to have to mentally map which is which to me. But David, do you want to talk through what the 3 current options that we're proposing? And let's just say, now. So this is going out. It's gone out in a press release earlier this week, and so it's in the public domain. We talked about this a bit last week, but because it was confidential, I didn't feel like I could talk about what these proposals were. But I've known about them for a few weeks and talked about them with kind of councillors in my group at HDC. So it looks like that one of these three options is going to be the option that goes forward. Now, how's that going to get decided? We don't know that yet. Yeah, it's probably going to get decided by the leaders. Yeah, executive decisions in cabinets if they've got cabinets, although possibly it's going to go to full council to vote. And whereas I'd like everybody to have an opinion, yeah, I don't think at the moment there's much mechanism. There's not going to be a referendum or anything, and there's not going to be that much consultation, I don't think, about these things in public. And that's a bad thing because these are big changes, you know. But it's also, you know, it's also slightly reasonable as well because people don't necessarily understand local government, and everybody's going to be, you know, banking for people. I think people in St Neots will almost all say we want to stay part of kind of Greater Cambridge rather than be part of Greater Peterborough. Yeah, but you have to understand all of the kind of nuanced economic decisions, and that's the final thing to say is that whatever we do, yeah, the two unitaries, because it probably will be two that we end up with, both need to be financially viable. Yeah, and that's easy for the one that involves Cambridge, and less easy for the one that involves Peterborough. So let's have a chat about the options. Well, to stop me having to wear on any longer.
So there's option A, which is a northwest southeast split. So you'd have Peterborough, which is number 1, Fenland, which is number 2, and Huntingdon, which is number 3.
Huntingdonshire
in one authority, and then you'd have East Cambs number 4, South Cambs number 5, and the City of Cambridge number 6 in another authority. Option B is the Greater Cambridge Partnership. So Cambridge 6 and South Cambs 5 would be the Southern Authority. Everything else would be the Northern Authority. So Peterborough, Fenland, Huntingdonshire, and East Cambs. And then option C, which is the Northeast Southwest split, you'd have Peterborough, Fenland, and East Cambs as one authority, and then Huntingdonshire, South Cambs, the City of Cambridge as another authority. So those are the options that are on the table.
So the first thing to say about this, yeah, in this jigsaw puzzle, yeah, lots of the pieces naturally fit together, yeah, and so in all of those three options, you've got South Cambs and Cambridge City fitting together. So nobody's denying that. That's going to happen one way or another. And those two councils want to get into bed with each other, for want of a better word, and be partners. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Because, you know, Greater Cambridgeshire, South Cambs circles Cambridge City like a donut, and it just makes sense for these two things to fit together. Even though they've got I was driving through South Cambs yesterday quite a lot. They've got very different identities, because South Cambs is very rural and lots of villages, whereas Cambridge is this university tech hub city. Yeah, but increasingly, lots of the science parks are spreading over into South Cambs, and they're seen as part of a coherent region. And they already work together on planning and other services, and they also share some services with Huntingdonshire as well, which is another point that's worth making. So those two things can happen. And equally, you'd say that Fenland and Peterborough, yeah, again, Peterborough is in the Fens, isn't it? You know, or parts of Peterborough on the outskirts of it. If you drive to the north of Peterborough, as I did on Friday, you are right in the heart of the Fens. And so Peterborough and Fenland are almost certainly going to go together as well, because, you know, both demographically and kind of historically they fit together, and also this is an important axis politically. They fit together because, you know, those areas have been, you know, I know Peterborough flip-flops a bit, but there's a strong conservative power base in the north, I think. And so the real discussion about this is what happens to East Cambs, which is tiny, and Huntingdonshire, which is huge. So other than Peterborough, the biggest one of these councils, both in terms of area and population, is Huntingdonshire. And East Cambs is small, so it's easy to weld East Cambs onto any of the other options without really changing things too much. But because Huntingdonshire is so big, it makes a big difference. And so my feeling is that while all the jigsaw pieces fit together quite well, the one that doesn't fit, yeah, and we had a comment from somebody last week saying one council is going to be forced against its will to do something and not go in willingly and suffer as a consequence. The one that doesn't really fit is Huntingdonshire, because there is a huge difference between the north of Huntingdonshire, which I'd include places like Ramsey, Sawtry and Yaxley, which are kind of all, demographically part of Greater Peterborough and look to Peterborough, I would say, and the south of the district, which, Huntingdon, St Ives, Gob Manchester, St Neots, all Little Paxton, all look towards Cambridge and feel a bit different. And the north of Huntingdonshire again is in the Fens and part of that kind of Fenland identity. And so the piece that doesn't really fit in all this, and if we were going to split anything, is Hunts, because I think there's a good argument for splitting up Hunts along kind of constituency lines, and the south of Hunts going towards Cambridge and the north of Hunts going towards Peterborough. Although my very dear friend and cabinet colleague Sally Howell, who represents Yaxley and is an independent and on the cabinet with me, there's lots of people in Yaxley who're scared about being part of Peterborough, because actually financially in the past both Peterborough and Fenland have been basket cases compared to places like Huntingdonshire.
I would be fair to Fenland to a certain extent with that. Fenland would argue that they are very on top of things financially now, and they would use justification for that as the fact that they have an increased council tax for about 74 decades or something.
They've also got by far the highest council tax in the whole of the area. Peterborough's council. I did some calculation for 14 years.
But again, there's reasons for that, and part of the reason for that is it gets skewed towards the lower tax bands, because we have got very, very few of the high tax bands within Fenland. Council tax band, so it does skew it. But I mean, there's a couple of things. I'm not convinced by that, by the way. I think if you look at East Cambs, which is also hasn't increased council tax for a long while, East Cambs can sit there and make justification for how they've done it through business growth and stuff like that. At Fenland, what you look at is a Fenland that is absolutely torn to the core. In terms of what it does, its planning service is really struggling. Its business development and economic development service, which we don't half need in Fenland, is absolutely stripped to the core. And that's how Fenland has survived. It's not through efficiency, it's and through growing business income and stuff like that. It's fundamentally through cuts. And if anybody from Fenland wants to give me different information, please do it. But I know what I've seen, and I know what everybody else has seen with the planning service and with things like economic development. But
so, and you know a lot more about that than I do, yeah. So that's take your word. Fenland is a place which I adore. Places like Wisbech, I think they're great, yeah. And I love Fenland, but I don't know a lot about it. So anything I say is probably fairly ignorant, yeah. But it's a very different kind of council.
No, absolutely. I would also argue that Fenland is such a poor council that it doesn't deserve to have a say in this. And that's a reality.
Well, it's also the district council. Sorry, the district council is run by Conservatives, but every single county council seat now, apart from Steve Tierney's and Sam Hoy's, are all Reform, aren't they? So So the other thing that's definitely going on here, yeah, and I think it's certainly that the different councils will support different ones of these options, and I don't think we're all going to come to one conclusion. There's been lots of pressure to take some of these off the table, yeah, and some of us had to fight a big rearguard action to keep some of these things on the table. And what happens, yeah, and I think this is really unfortunate, yeah, and other people might disagree with me, but I think that these decisions were made principally along the lines of gerrymandering. Yeah, in keeping current political parties in the snapshot of their current political control, which is always transient.
Yeah.
There's arguments for keeping, the South Cambs City, East Cambs, yeah, would be a pretty hot Lib Dem council. Yeah, whereas Fenland, East Cambs, Peterborough, and even maybe Huntingdonshire would probably, and we don't know because things change so quickly, would be a strong Conservative council. Yeah, and it's very difficult for people in those groups to to make arguments that won't support them in their own political. And I think so. I think that whatever Huntingdonshire, I don't think that's true in Huntingdonshire, because Huntingdonshire doesn't have political identity, a single one, and we're a joint administration. You know, we're all working together. And actually, I think people in my cabinet, are working together for getting the best solution for Huntingdonshire, whatever that is. And I think there's a view emerging. I can't speak and tell you what the view of the council is, because the council hasn't made a decision. But I know what my view is, and I know that I'm supported by some of my colleagues.
There's a couple of things. The government have said that all of these councils have to be these new unitaries have to be financially viable.
That's the top criteria as well, because what they don't want to do is they don't want these to fail after 2 years, because there's been lots of councils failing, hasn't there? Lots of big councils, lots of small councils, and Peterborough is on the edge of failure constantly. I would say.
Absolutely, and this is the point that I would make. There are lots of councils that are on the edge of failure. I understand that, but that's the issue. Is this is going to save money, but we've still got the social care issue sat in the background of this that is getting worse and worse, and is one of the things that is driving a lot of councils towards bankruptcy. So what this may do is create councils that are financially viable for 3 or 4 years, but until we sort social care out, it's coming back to bite us.
And we have to expect this is going to last for about last lot lasted for. I mean, my age. I was born in 1972, so 51 years the last lot. So Huntingdonshire's been around as a district council. Cambridge has been around for a county council since 1974. So
I have my suspicions about this. I think it's a bit too rushed for it to be sustainable. Just to give you an example, if you look at this Peterborough thing, first of all, I absolutely agree with the idea of splitting the north of Huntingdonshire and the south of Huntingdonshire. I think it makes a lot of sense. But if you look at that map, you've got what looks like a common sense thing, whether you go 356 or 456, you've got something common sense that looks at travel to work areas and stuff like that for South Cams. And I think that makes a lot of sense. If you look at Peterborough, the fact that you're not looking to the north or to the west for anything stands out in a big way. And for me, that suggests that maybe this isn't being thought out as well as it could have been. And much as I'm glad something is being done and being done quickly, my suspicion is in 4 or 5 years' time, somebody's going to say, we need to look at this again.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to build councils and local authorities around travel to work areas, because it makes a lot more, and those are never perfect, but it makes a lot more sense in terms of economic development if you do that. Where's your investment in roads going to go, and all this sort of stuff. It makes a lot more sense.
I want to talk about travel to work areas in a bit, but let's hear from David.
So I think there's an issue that so it's local government reform. I think most people would accept that the current system, the split levels, doesn't work. I don't think it ever has. But I think at the moment, it's the contradictions within it are just, the system is crazy. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get a decent map of it. So I've only got a photo of it, but it's who is responsible for cutting grass in Huntingdon. And there's like public bits of grass. And there's actually 5 different organisations. And you've got, there's a Verge down in Hertford, where it's one piece of grass that part of it is done by the district, part by the town council, and part by the county council that's contracted out to the town. Just the whole thing is anyway. And
mostly we don't know who owns which lamppost. Yeah, so if a lamppost bulb goes out, even the councils don't know, and the councils don't know for sure. And quite often, even sometimes, there'll be disputed lampposts that nobody knows. County council, district council, town councils don't know which one. So that's another good example. Sorry, David.
Just want to say, isn't it ludicrous, the idea of having disputed lampposts?
Yeah.
It's frustrating as well. It's absolutely. If you're a resident or you're a councillor involved in that, it's utterly.
Yeah. So I think there's that, and the government just wants to get it done, and I think it's the 5 the 5 year term. They want to get it done, and I think hopefully have some chance of having having the process done by the time of the next election. So that, hence wanting to get done quickly. The other thing is you've also got coming in with this the strategic mayors or whatever they're called, the mayors with more powers. Now, I'm not a fan of the mayors generally. I don't think. I'm really unclear about what the point of the mayor is if they've got of a combined authority mayor with two authorities underneath them. I'm not sure. There's going to have to be a reworking of how that works. And I think in Cambridgeshire they've had less power than elsewhere anyway, and it's been messy. I think.
Yeah,
sorry.
Well, I think we should say, David, that the proposed structure, whether you go for option A or option C, I'm writing off option B. I think it's an utterly selfish model. But if you go for option A or C, that model is a lot less clumsy as far as the combined authority oversight is concerned than what we've got at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I mean, the may well be the case. I mean, the issue is, as you said, you're not staying within boundaries means you can get it done more quickly. But you've got, the catchment area for Peterborough, the Peterborough travel to work area extends north of Peterborough and west of Peterborough.
Yeah.
And so that's an issue. You've also got the Newmarket gap, where it might actually make sense for Newmarket to be in with East Cambs.
Can I just say as well? So I went to Haverhill yesterday, and which is quite close to, not far from Newmarket, yeah. And on the way back, because of the A421 was close, we also drove through Royston, which is another place which is bizarrely, Haverhill, Newmarket, especially Newmarket, and parts of Newmarket are in Cambridgeshire, but Newmarket in general is that big gap you can see on the right hand side. Haverhill, Royston, where else did I say? Newmarket, and also possibly places like Tempsford, in Bedfordshire, are part of the kind of Cambridgeshire ecosystem, but are not part of it. And it would be a perfect opportunity, should be to redraw the boundaries slightly to make sure those places were connected to the places where travel to work and economic influence and everything they look to.
But I think the thing is, if you do that, it starts becoming a much bigger thing. And we go back to
this is supposed to be a cost-saving exercise as well. It's supposed to be cheap, and it's not going to be cheap, and it's going to cost. I don't know when did Peterborough split off from Cambridgeshire politically. But that's when I started as a councillor, that was 10, 20 years in, still not untangled. When I started as a county councillor, they were still trying to untangle the services, and it takes a bloody long time to do that, and it's very, very expensive.
Yeah,
because they've all got shared services.
I think over the long term, it will save money. I think that's true. Where I have sympathy with the government on this, and I do think that's ideally the right way of doing it, is to do some sort of proper oversight of this. The trouble is, the government want to do this in one term. And as soon as you start saying, okay, we're going to have an inquiry, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, blah, 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 you push it into the second term.
Yeah.
And if you push it into a second term, I bet you bottom dollar it won't happen, because the election in the middle of that, there'll be campaigns to force it out. So from that perspective, I have a lot of sympathy with the government. I do think it will save money. It won't save money on social care, sadly, and I think that is something that we should be worried about.
So I agree. The thing is, I mean, I think it may make things. There will be such a thing as the council, which will be great. There will be it will be in general easier to work out who is responsible for what, and that is a good thing. But there will be so there will be some efficiencies, some savings, so all the rest of it. But there are still some. You've still got the fundamental issues that local government has got is responsible for very expensive things, social care, and hasn't had more money. In fact, has had its money cut pretty savagely over the last few years, which is what you get this thing about why am I paying more council tax but the potholes are still there? Well, there you go. And that the government, I think, has said it's going to be doing a review on social care, or is doing a review on social care, but that's not reporting immediately. So
kicking that into long grass again is an absolute shocker in my view.
And it's not great. I mean, I don't know, and this may be my sort of pre-existing biases, but I do wonder if there's actually, if the quite a lot of money, the money that goes into social care seems to be ending up going to private equity companies who, I'm not saying they necessarily have an objection to, private provision, being involved, but these are pretty clearly organizations that are, profit above all else and aren't necessarily taking a long-term view on things, so on. I do wonder if slow insourcing, or councils or the government in some way running its own service, as some sort of competition might work. I don't know. I mean, obviously, councils running businesses can be tricky. But yeah, you've got those big ticket items there, and I think we need to sort of do a better job of explaining to people that the reason that ultimately the reason there's lots of potholes is COVID, Brexit, austerity, that sort of thing. I don't think that's ever sort of been got across very effectively.
But I agree. But once you got these councils established, and even when shadow councils are running, which they will run for a year before elections take place, they need to start making decisions about some of the other stuff where you could save money. Some of this stuff, you talked about grass cutting, who manages cemeteries, who's going to be responsible, and make a decision to say, all of those are going to be under the control of one single authority, whether it's a parish council or the council, and then the council itself can put area structures in or whatever to make oversight of it if they go that way. But personally, I would try and push some of that day-to-day routine stuff down more to parish and town councils, and I would try and make the unitary more strategic.
I'd go for that, definitely. I mean, the other thing, of course, is I think they are, over time, they are the locals, the different authorities, the lower authorities are going to be getting more power, and the mayor of Cambs and Peterborough will be getting more powers, which is good. And just having a single organization doing things will make things considerably easier, I think.
So when we're just looking at the three options on the table, I think, what did you say about option B, Martin? What do you think about option B? Is what did you call it?
I think it's utterly selfish. I think it's utterly selfish by South Camden City, and it doesn't make sense. I'm of all of these models, sorry to everybody in Huntingdonshire, I prefer option A, and the reason for that, for me, and is a lot of it is about Ely. To be honest, I see Ely as a city with huge potential, and I think trying to link Ely better with South Cambs and the city, I think is a win-win. And you can say the same about Huntingdon, you can say the same about St Neots, I know that, and St Ives, but I think for me, out of all of those, Ely is the one.
So I think the one that's most likely by a significant margin to be the final choice, I don't know this for sure, I'm speculating, is option B, despite the fact you've just said that it's selfish. It's South Cambs and Cambridge City, and then everybody else. And I would say now that in terms of financial viability, what that leaves is quite a big northern unitary, which is well over 500,000 population, and there's arguments that because it's economies of scale, and a very, very small southern unitary, but based around Cambridge's position as this economic powerhouse, but doesn't help the council sometimes in terms of economies of scale and also meeting growth targets. And so for that southern unitary to succeed, if the Greater Cambridge, basically it's Greater Peterborough and Greater Cambridge, and I'm telling you, nobody in the south of Huntingdonshire will see their identity as being part of Greater Peterborough, as I would suggest most people in East Cambs will not either. So whatever we call that identity is going to be really weird because people in St Neots are pissed off about being ruled from Huntingdon in their opinion. Now, trying to roll them up by saying, how do you feel about being ruled from Peterborough and Wisbech in the future? Because, you know, it's a big area with not much of an identity. Yeah, I think people where we live, David and I, are proud to be part of Cambridgeshire. Maybe where David lives, they're proud to be part of Huntingdonshire. But nobody, I think very few people in the south of
the Fenland Peterborough thing, though, one of the other things is Fenland does sometimes struggle to recruit.
Yeah.
You know, that's part of to do with the issue, as I understand it, with the planning service. And so moving the planning service, as an example, hook, line and sinker into Peterborough helps to deal with that problem. So doing that, by the way, will cause some controversy in itself. Council in Fenland councils will be leaping up and down about that, but it makes sense. The issue for me is, one of the issues for me is we keep talking about you know, the Cambridge phenomenon and all this stuff, but there's a reality, which is that if we want Cambridge to reach its potential, it is not going to do it within the confines of that boundary of just 5 and 6.
Yeah,
it just won't. Or if you do, it's going to be so dense that it becomes an unpleasant place to live and work, and that's why it can't survive just on that. For me, you know, one of the arguments that isn't up here is 3, 4, 5, 6.
It's not, because it's not. Well, so the Peterborough MP, Sam Carling, or one of the Peterborough MPs, has come out yesterday and said basically he doesn't like these plans because they merge Peterborough with areas which are not Peterborough. That's not his words exactly. I read them out earlier, but his statement is this doesn't suit basically the cultural identity of Peterborough, yeah, and neglects the fact, as you said to me before this, Martin, there's lots of the, you know, Peterborough's current footprint is also rural, you know, like Huntingdonshire and like East Cambs and Fenland. And so those kind of comments are odd because, you know, it's about economies of scale ultimately. And so what you're suggesting there, having, you know, a split that just left Fenland and Peterborough wouldn't be seen as being viable. I think there was one of the options that was looked at was Peterborough expanding its boundaries slightly and growing in to Fenland and parts of Huntingdonshire. Yeah, but I think the feeling about that would be too small. I've got an interesting point to make about your recruitment point as well. I think I'll just. Did you want to talk about that, or should we?
Well, I mean, we can talk about it because one of my other understandings with that is they tried to do a thing. They tried to implement golden handshakes for planners, and were stopped.
Well, so in terms of so a big challenge, other than social care, a big challenge for all councils is recruiting planners. You know, because graduate planners get much more money in the private sector than they do working for councils. Yeah, and it's a huge issue. All councils, planning services, struggle to recruit and maintain planners. Yeah, a council which particularly struggled when I first was elected was South Cambs and Cambridge City, who've got shared services, and the way that South Cambs dealt with that was by switching to a 4-day week. Yeah, and so the other thing about getting into bed with South Cambs and City, probably means adopting a 4-day week, which is politically controversial. Now, I think I could go to my residents in St Neots and say, like, the cost of being part of Greater Cambridgeshire is a 4-day week for council employees, and I think I could make that argument and win that argument. But across to even South Cambs and certainly across, you know, the more blue-leaning parts of the district, the 4-day week is incredibly controversial, even though, you know, there's lots of good arguments for it.
That's because they only choose to see one side of the argument. I've seen those debates on social media.
That will be part of the price of getting into bed with South Cambs and City, I think, which for some people might be unpalatable. It's not particularly unpalatable for me, but for some people that might be unpalatable. So that whole recruitment and retention thing is a big issue as well, and those kind of things are playing out in the background as well.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a number of these. So, you know, within Fenland, you know, we have free parking, and you know, we've become part of Peterborough. I'll tell you, one of the things that I will fight about is keeping free parking in our market towns. I have done it in the past, and I've annoyed leaders through doing it, because it is there's a thing about free parking is a real USP for Finland. We don't make enough of it, by the way. That's another issue. But from my perspective, you don't get rid of the USPs. You build on them, so I think that battle is to come. But there'll be a number of those across the whole of the county, I think.
So I think option B is the most likely. I think as of today, I think the least likely is probably option A, because I think the current administration in East Cambs, we want to be part of the North politically and not want to be part of this Liberal Democrat axis, and so that comes down to gerrymandering and politics again. So I'm not sure there's any particular support for option A other than probably the county council Lib Dems probably want to have that because it will build their power base. And equally, option C is I would assume is pretty unpopular with anybody other than the current Huntingdonshire councillors. But ultimately, we're going to try to submit a consensus proposal in November, but that probably won't happen. And ultimately, this decision will be made by government. And so I think they're working up economic business cases for all of these three options. And I think that option C is very economically viable and a good solution as well. But it's difficult to say that. And the economic data we've seen so far.
I'm not sure it's economically viable for East Cambs is a reality.
But East Cambs is tiny though, compared to all the others. East Cambs is tiny and makes a much less impact on where it ends up. The other thing to say is that this decision is supposed to be made on data, yeah. But the data I've seen so far is of such poor quality, yeah, and interpreted in so many different ways. So one of the important things that you mentioned, Martin, is travel to work areas, yeah. And I've seen some data which suggests that Huntingdonshire's principal travel to work direction is north towards Peterborough, yeah, and that's just not true. It's not true. Obviously, there's places in like in Yaxley. If you live in Yaxley, yeah, or Sawtree, you'll probably look to Peterborough for employment. I drive to Peterborough every day, yeah, from St Neots, yeah. But for the majority of people, St Neots, St Ives, Hunstanton, Godmanchester, Little Paxton, which is over half the population of Huntingdonshire, look to Cambridge as their commuter destination. And there's economic and there's social. If I'm going to go out in the evening, I'm going to go to Cambridge. I've been to Peterborough once for a see Stuart Lee, which was a bit odd. But in general, we go to Cambridge for food, we go to Cambridge for shopping, or Milton Keynes more often. We don't go to Peterborough. And that's part of, so I've heard that information misrepresented.
We need to meet up for a beer in Peterborough.
So there's a few things. I actually I think the commuting destination for a lot of people is London.
Yeah. Especially Hunstanton and St Neots as well, where you've got a direct connection. But if you look in St Ives, St Ives has got the busway. Yeah, it's part of that. Yeah. It's a Cambridge commuter town.
Yeah. There's that. You've got the what's it called? The East West Rail coming, and it seems to make sense for that. It would be easier to develop. I suppose what I wanted to ask was...
And a new busway, also Camborne to Cambridge busway, which is going to also serve, that there'll be a big park and ride there that people in St Ives and St Neots can drive to if they choose to, and get to Cambridge easy as well. So, and we've got the new A421, which will be finished before this will as well, which is also going to make it easy to get to Cambridge. So those east-west connections are growing quite fast. We have got a good train line to Peterborough. If you get on it in the morning, there's not that many people on it from St Neots, I'll tell you that much.
No, I mean, do you think there's any... So I'm assuming that the only way that the government would look at a split proposal is if the local authority in the area turned around and said, look, we really think this is the only way to do it. Do you think there's any chance at all of the various authorities coming together and saying...
Not from here, no. I think we've already... This is the problem. These decisions have been made, behind closed door by elected representatives and unelected officers to a certain extent, but those decisions have already been made. And so the thing that Alex was talking, I'm not betraying a confidence here, but Alex was messaging me last night saying, what evidence is there, that we actually can't split authorities? It's not. It's just a government. It's government rumours, yeah, and or government have said it in briefings, perhaps. But it's taken as being hard and fast. And you know for a start, yeah, if you split an authority, it's going to be more expensive.
I think the government guidance says they would prefer not to have it. It doesn't say you can't have it.
Yeah, and so that's the problem that we so actually, I think that the only chance of that happening if there was some huge groundswell of public opinion, and if you can ever generate that much excitement about something which is quite abstract from lots of people's real lives. But actually, I'm starting to hear that passion at the moment. So I think you were involved in Huntingdon Town Council motion, which basically, what did that motion say, David? I think you helped.
So that basically we wanted to be in with Cambridge, and to get various town and parish councils nearby to get in touch with them, see if they wanted to work together on that. So that's basically what it said. So I'll follow up on that on Thursday.
But it's moving so quickly towards trying to get these plans together. They're going to invest loads of money in preparing these business cases now, and so nobody's going to be prepared to pay any money to support a business case. And the prices I've heard are like £250,000 to £1 million to get a business case together. For a split one, that evidence will never be there, and I don't think that'll be part of discussions. And ultimately, the government's probably going to be choosing, and you have to say the political bias of the government, who will see Cambridge City used to be, until recently a Labour heartland. It's starting to feel a bit frayed around the edges. So I want to support that.
But you've also got to understand who's got the ear of government as well, and primarily at the moment that'll be Peterborough and Cambridge City.
Yeah.
My understanding is as of next week, Peterborough changes if John Elworthy's right, and that may change leadership. But at the moment, Peterborough's Conservative led. And Cambridge City is, Peterborough's Labour-led, and Cambridge City is Labour-led, and we've got a Labour government. So there's going to be influence coming that way.
Yeah, I mean it's a difficult one. I mean, I've said exactly this in sort of like Labour discussions and so on, where people, my lot aren't immune from it about going for like partisan considerations. It's not entirely clear that the Conservatives will be a significant force at the next general election. But I think they probably will be, but they are having more problems than they have for a very long time.
But that's true. But also, it's irrelevant at the moment because they're the ones at district councils who are holding the rudder, aren't they? Lots of district councils.
Hold on. No, what I'm saying is there's the political situation will change in the next 50 years dramatically, and I think trying to do things for political, or for partisan advantage, is a complete waste of time because it's so short term.
I agree too, but they still will.
I agree. I've made the case before about. I think I said this last week. I don't think Fenland is conservative simply because the population are conservative. I think a lot of it is the lack of organisation of the other political parties within Fenland. They just don't organise themselves, and there's a reality for the Labour Party that if they want to take control of Peterborough, in a unitary that involves, potentially, it will definitely involve Fenland. They're going to have to get themselves organised in Fenland, and they will pick up seats if they do that on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and that's going to, there are lots of things that need to, need to happen. It's just a point that I find. I'm sure all the parties are doing it. I find it really frustrating that people are going to this really, short-sightedness and the sort of short-term political advantage.
It makes me not want to be part of politics anymore. It really does. I'm done with it. I'm so bored of it because it's just pointless. And I don't think that's the case in Huntingdonshire because we have got a kind of split political landscape here where I'm part of a joint administration. And actually, I've been really, really enthusiastic about some of my colleagues from different political parties who have put those views aside to support what's best for Huntingdonshire, which what we should all be doing.
But I've always said to you, Stephen, that the Conservatives that you've got at the moment within Huntingdonshire are different. I've sat and watched your council meetings, and I've watched how the Conservatives behave, and I think they're pretty reasonable, to be honest. They hold the council to account without engaging too much in the yaboo. They're not afraid to agree on a few things, and that's how more should be.
I agree completely. What I'd like to do is to try and to spark up a bit more debate amongst people and have people come out, because I think there's going to be a harsh reality that people who enjoy having their Cambridgeshire identity in the south of Huntingdonshire are going to be shocked when they find that Cambridgeshire ceases to exist. Yeah, we might be called something that's still called Cambridgeshire, perhaps. Maybe we won't. The branding is going to be important, and it is important. It's important for house prices and identity. Part of the reason I moved here, because I thought Cambridgeshire is a groovy place to be. Yeah, Peterborough, as much as I love it working there, not such a great brand at the moment, and so people are going to feel that this whole stupid St Neots looking, don't like being ruled from Huntingdon thing, which has always been ridiculous, is going to be amplified when we are, our concerns are probably secondary to Peterborough's concerns, and our social care issues are probably secondary to the more serious, economic deprivation and social care issues in both Peterborough and Fenland. And so, the reason why Huntingdonshire will probably end up being in the north is because the north isn't viable without Huntingdonshire's economic growth, because we're doing really well in lots of areas, places like Alconbury Weald, like Brampton Cross perhaps coming in the future, like Wintringham. Our housing is, and if you look at Alconbury Weald now, it's a fantastic example of what the east of England should be, both in terms of servicing the Cambridge bubble, but also having its own identity. And so Huntingdonshire is an important part of this. It's not very fashionable, and so I don't think South Cambs and Cambridge City think that we're just a rural backwater and not big part of the future economic growth, which is also naive and stupid, I think.
There's a reality about Alconbury Weald, about how it's held up as an example of best practice across the country in terms of the way it's developed and everything else. And the way it came forward as well, The
other point here is, of course, and let's talk about the positives about being in the north as well. What Alconbury Weald needs, is their local, all the politicians to pull together and their local to fight for a train station at Alconbury Weald on the East Coast Main Line. That would make a huge amount of difference to that as well. And equally, Ely Junction is something that everybody agrees we should be doing. I've been talking about it forever, but it hasn't got a massive government support. So being part of a north, which fights for those things, rather than only worried about Cambridge's needs. We've just seen that Greater Cambridge, during my time on county council, wasn't the best example of a sensible, the Greater Cambridge Partnership and the whole STZ stuff was handled really, really badly, both politically and by everybody. And so it's not always the great bastion it's held up to be. And I don't, as much as I love Cambridge or being part of it, I'm not a massive fan of the place itself. I don't really get it. It's not where I live.
Go on, David.
How much? So I want to pick up. This is the question goes to Darren's question as well, which I'm going to put on screen. How much does the Cambridgeshire identity actually? Is that okay? If is it in some way relevant to people? Yeah, sure. People probably say yes. Is that a driving factor? The other thing is on this. I'm not sure I care about the historic stuff. I mean, I just think given the sort of challenges we're facing and the need to deliver services effectively, it almost feels like a luxury we can't afford.
Yeah, well, historically, our borders haven't been like this anyway. So
Cambridgeshire was invented in 1974, and has no real historic or other identity other than it's funky because it's got the word Cambridge in it, and that's a good brand, Huntingdonshire and the Soak of Peterborough have far more history than any of those places. But there's always been a difference between historic counties and local government. You know, I was born in County Cleveland in Middlesbrough, and then it was Teesside, and now it's something else, and it changes every few years. And so, you know, people don't necessarily line themselves up with those things anyway. Nobody really cares about which councils represent them, apart from idiots like us.
Yeah. I mean, what you want is good representation. There is one thing that needs to be looked at with either of these options that needs to be thought about. And I hope there's some discussion about it. One of the issues Peterborough has faced is lack of available land for commercial development. It's been an issue on a couple of planning applications that have gone through. I think one of them went through on appeal. And there is a danger that what you're going to get is a shift of commercial development into sort of strong rural areas. I mean, you know, one of the concerns of Whittlesea residents is the merging of Peterborough with Whittlesea. And I, much as I'm a bit uncomfortable with it, I think there's an inevitability about it, to be honest. But those sort of things we need to think about. You know, what is a future option A or whichever option going to look like as far as economic growth goes? And the other thing for me is I'd love to see Peterborough be a little bit more ambitious about the type of businesses it attracts, and you know, start to look at you know, what sort of niche high tech can we build based on the fact that, you know, we are that close to Cambridge and we're getting increasingly better connected to Cambridge.
Yeah. So I don't know if we've got any solutions here today. You know, of the options on the table, rather obviously, as a resident of St Neots and a representative of St Neots, and if I asked my residents which ones they support, most of them are going to come back with option C. So for the time being, I support option C, and it will be. I would prefer to support a solution which split Huntingdonshire possibly along the parliamentary boundaries, and which would put or you know, or a variation of that, which would put some of the market towns in with Cambridge. I mean, certainly St Ives and St Neots and Huntingdon, they do feel like it. But if you rip those out of Huntingdonshire, then the rest is not particularly economically viable anyway. And so there's no easy solutions, is there? And it's a very complicated problem. Yeah, it's pretty intractable. And whatever solution you're going to come up with, it's a compromise. But for today, yeah, I'm strongly in the option C camp, and I suspect if it wasn't for me and some of my colleagues' voices, option C wouldn't still be on the table, and we'll be talking about option A and option B, which for residents in Huntingdonshire would be a much less interesting discussion. So
I mean, I think the with option C, I mean, so the issue with option C is you've got a long way to go from the northwest corner of Peterborough to the southeast corner of East Cambs, and mutatis mutandis for Huntingdonshire and South Cambs, where, you know, it's like if you could draw a line north south, that, you know, I can see why 4-5, you know, option A has a logic to it. It's just it's not a good logic for Huntingdonshire or for you know, these bits of Huntingdonshire.
I mean, I have to say, and it's worth saying this, because I do think it's important. In a country where we're increasingly criticised, or not increasingly, but we have for years and years been criticised, because you know, a lot of our travel is about north-south and not about east-west. The fact that you can make a justification for Huntingdonshire to come into and be part of Cambridge and a Cambridge unitary, based on travel to work and based on travel, it's a positive about what's been achieved over the last however many years.
Oh, so that's the other thing I was going to say. That there's a problem with the data we've got. Obviously, a lot of the data comes from the census, and the last census happened during COVID.
Yeah,
and so a lot of things are, you know, are weird. You know, obviously more people do work from home, but at the time, you know, the question is where, you know, where are you, where are you where are you working? People say, well, I'm working from home at the moment, or I'm furloughed. And so actually, I'm going to try to flash it up because I think it's a really good website. So bear with me a minute. There's a website called DataShine, which has travel to work areas. Give me just a moment, because I think this illustrates things quite well. I'm going to try to.
I mean, they're able to capture this a lot better now because they capture data using sat navs, not sat navs, using mobile phones. So they can capture a couple of projects I've been involved in. We've captured data and paid for data from this stuff. And that's what it basically does. Is it uses the network that we've got on mobile phone towers now to track movement, and so the data that we've got now from that is really, really good.
So this is the travel to work on DataShine for basically red is the one we're interested in. This is where people are going to work. Unfortunately, you can't see my pointer. This is for Huntingdonshire 009. Yeah, Phil, I agree. It is a good site. Its data is from the 2011 census, and I did, in fairness to myself, I did just say that. I think there is a problem that's used, but it's it's a good indication, and I would need convincing that things have changed that dramatically. But
they are changing. They're changing all the time. I used to work from home, but now I'm working back in the office in Peterborough 5 days a week, so it's changing all the time.
Absolutely, but if you look at, I mean, the biggest places people go to work, or you've got lots of people going in Huntingdon, going to work at Hinchingbrook and so on. But
it's worth saying, what are the changes that have been made since then? Since then, we've got a guided bus in place. Took too long, but we've got a guided bus in place. Since then, the A14 has been massively upgraded to improve, travel from Huntingdon to Cambridge. So I would argue, Phil, that much as you would need data to back it up, I would argue that the evidence suggests that from a Huntingdonshire perspective, there's likely to be more travel towards the Cambridge area than less compared to 2011.
The issue is this is for where I've chosen here is Sawtry, and you can see that a lot of people go from Sawtry, or at least did in 2011, go to Huntingdon. Lots are going up to Peterborough as well, and you do have some going over to Cambridge. But so it's difficult. There's no perfect place to draw these lines. But
it looks like one person going to Whittlesea.
Well, no, each line represents at least 6 people, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, it's a difficult one. I mean, I think hopefully we're going to try to.
I do think one thing that is worth arguing about strongly is that it makes absolutely no sense at all for places like Yaxley to stay within the within Huntingdonshire if Huntingdonshire is to form part of Cambridge. It just makes absolute no sense at all, and somebody needs to bite the bullet and agree with that.
The other thing we were going to talk about, which was suggested by Andrew Jones, who
I'm going to have to go, lads. So maybe can we do that next week?
Okay. Yeah. We'll talk about that. Let's wrap it there and see everybody again next week. I think Sundays.
Yeah, and Andrew's got a really good question, but we'll talk about it next week, I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Andrew, you'll have to wait till next time. Thanks everybody, and see you out there in the future.
See you later. Bye.